But go ahead.
Okay. Jennifer, I really appreciate the fact that you said that we need to kind of get rid of the concept of outreach, that we're reaching out to minority communities, because it's been my observation thus far that, as you all were mentioning, that minority communities are very concerned about environmental issues, are very active in their own communities surrounding environmental issues. But what I'm finding is that there is a lack of trust, there's lost trust between minority communities and mainstream environmental organizations, many of whom are represented today. I'm on the board of one, of the local chapter of the Sierra Club. And there's some trust issues. And I was wondering what your thoughts are about how to mend and build trust between minority communities who are already active on environmental issues and mainstream organizations.
Well, I'll give my response first, and of course, it's something that Earthjustice and our clients are, currently in the thick of trying to figure out the answer to this question. And so I won't claim to know, to be able to tell you a bromide, but I think, backing up a little bit, it's important to learn from past mistakes, past examples of where people have tried to go into a community and just basically messed it up. You can go in, and I think there's a feeling that organizations sort of helicopter in, take what they need, and then leave, and don't make a commitment. And that's a really sensitive issue, and it's something that we really grapple with because, the nature of all our organizations is that we have, sort of missions and goals to accomplish, and they aren't always as tied in as we would, wish, with sort of local, place-based, long-term problems that require a very long-term commitment. And so something that we've decided is that we're not going to get involved in a really important local issue unless we are seriously prepared to commit to it and to see it through. And we're not going to just come in, and this is an example for Earthjustice because this is what it applies, but we're not going to come in and just file a lawsuit to take care of one little piece of the problem and then leave, because that sort of, creates the trust problem. So that's one example of something that we can all do, I think, is make a serious long-term commitment to an issue. And I guess another example is, I've seen polls and materials that appear to me to be sort of transparently pandering in a way that presumes about people's attitudes. And I think we need to be very, very careful about that. I don't think that we should go, don't think we should go around sort of phrasing questions in a way that I think appeals to a presumed attitude without really understanding that, that may represent just a slice of the whole community's attitude, but you're sort of, getting the rest of the community to wonder, what on earth you're thinking. So I think really kind of understanding the community before you go out and just sort of say, hey, I'm here to help you, is really very important.
Also in the Latino community, some of that distrust might be related to, immigration status. So that might be an issue as well.
Yeah, I don't think it's a mistrust more than a misunderstanding of the community. I think sometimes groups come in not knowing the culture, not knowing, their problems, not knowing them. And so there's this resistance right away. I think groups need to vest in the community, really get to know the community before you come in and say, I want to do this. Really get to know who the leaders are and who are vested in that community is I think, the way to go.
It's interesting, as an example, Fort Lincoln. Often we get into campaigns where we're already behind, and we're trying to do something for the environment, to protect the river, to try to improve air quality or something. And it's like, you can't help it. It's like a war. You have to parachute in somehow. And you're not prepared, and you haven't done the groundwork. And hopefully a process like this can create a general sense of where we're, at least at the citywide level, where we're getting more connected out there, government and the NGO community, so that when there is an issue that pops up in the neighborhood, it won't be so hard. There won't be such a potential disconnect between the folks that are trying to do something good, or at least have an opinion of that maybe not destroying some wetlands in Fort Lincoln, which was the issue. You know, so we're constantly coming up against those kind of challenges, and so I guess my only point is we haven't always been able to do the prep to make sure we're talking to the right leaders and stuff, and but you know, ultimately, hopefully, we'll create some kind of infrastructure where it's happening, never stops happening, and that we're all kind of, it's kind of the mayor's one city concept. Is, you know, we're all in this together. We're all trying to move forward, and I think that's kind of what it means, right?
Right, it does.
Yeah. Okay, please.
I think you all have touched on very important points. One of the intricacies of other cultures is that they're even microcosms of cultures even within the same culture. So, because I know, and especially in African American communities, you can have someone from a different part of the territory and they speak a whole different language than somebody who is right across the street from them in doing transactions, business, and everything. So one of the hardest parts for me, we had a job training program. I think Jorge, Jorge led one of our groups.
Yeah.
We had a stimulus grant to do exact with the Urban Forestry Administration to do job training in urban forestry. We called ourselves reaching out to the Latino community, but during 4 sessions of approximately 40 persons per session, we only get like 1, 2 persons. So it's really kind of hard for both ends to penetrate each other, because one of the things is that there is sort of a suspiciousness because they don't see the long-term investment. People don't see the long-term investment. I know it's experiencing in our community. You get programs or groups that come in for a minute and say, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and then as soon as the funding runs out, they're out of there. And so I'm sure that all cultures and communities experience the same kind of thing. So it's where do you start? You know, it's just like, you want to be invested, you want everybody to participate in something, but it's going to take it from everybody, because, you know, I would love to see Latino people coming over to Marvin Gaye Park, okay? And I want to go over to wherever you guys hang out too, but there's got to be that person that kind of helps you lead into those kind of things too.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think a misunderstanding is that we're not just clustered in one area. You know, we all think it's Ward 1 is Latinoville. Well, that's actually not true.
Right.
You know, we're spreading out. Actually, Ward 1 is like the fastest.
7-2.
Yeah, it's decreasing tremendously. The other wards are growing. So we're moving to 6, 7, and 8. You know, so that's where we have to approach them, is those clusters. You know, and 7 has Colombian and Peruvian. What's the terminology that they use over there? What's the approach? It's going to be different than maybe Ward 8 that has more Mexican, right? So it's going to be a different approach. Ward 1, Salvadorian. You have to know that. Who are the leaders there? Who are you going to approach? Is it the churches on Sunday that you're going to go to, unlike a Tuesday morning? So your approach is going to be completely different.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I'm new to the group, and I'm Latino, if not Hispanic. And I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, Northern Virginia rather. And I never really been involved with that many Latinos, so I'm trying to change now, even though I'm from Puerto Rico. And if you think they're divided, try Puerto Rico, which is this big, and the people from San Juan speak differently than the people from the South, and So I'm trying to be part of the solution. I think a good way to start will be with schools. Like you mentioned, children have to translate to their parents. And I know the Latino community, they're people of the earth.
Definitely.
And kind of annoys me a little bit, to be honest here, that I just watched some immigration shows and everything is related to the Latino. There's more than Latinos. There's the Asian community nobody ever addresses. And I'm sorry, but I don't eat cat. I don't know, never mind, I'm not gonna say, I'm not gonna take it there, but, you know, I mean, I don't understand how they go about their environment, really, that's what I'm trying to say. So the Latino gets separated, and then people get confused, and there are different nationalities that do not connect with each other. For example, there's this theater called the Teatro La Luna, de la Luna, and the lady there says, you know, I put shows for the Peruvians and then the Cubans don't come, and I'll put shows for the Cubans and the Argentinians don't come. So within each other, they're separated, or we're separated. So I think the children will be a good way to start in schools.
Definitely, and that's something that we're actually doing. We're actually going to the schools and doing gardening at the schools to kind of get the parents and get the children involved. So it's something that Ola is doing at the moment.
Yeah, because it's the future, really, so we might not be as behind as you say we are, that the parents should in.
Yeah, in our case, we have seen that there's actually, you have to do a little bit more, at least for the reality of work, environmental work we do as an NGO, a lot of stewardship. We work with Hispanic kids, about, I would say like 15 to 20% of the kids that participate in our education programs are Hispanic. And in some cases, in some schools in PG County, it might be like 50%. But we have seen that that's not enough. We have to go to other community leaders, like you were saying. So at least in our case, I would say it takes more than that. Yeah, because working with kids, it doesn't immediately translate into having engaged the community.
Slowly they start talking to their parents, though. They start,
Exactly.
Dad, why don't you do that? There was someone else over here. There was a third person that was right over in this corner. Okay, Dick.
I was in local government.
Why don't you say who you are and which group you're in? This is
Robert Person, Local Green USA. I was in local government in Southern California for over 30 years, part of it as a city manager. And what I always found a little bit difficult was approaching anybody and saying that the message is, hi, I'm government and I'm here to help you. Because nobody believes that. It's kind of like an oxymoron with most people. And I think it gets doubly compounded when you have possibly illegal status, people that come from countries that are usually tying government to corruption, to abuses, and that was always very, very difficult to overcome.
Kat and then Rick.
Kat Schreier, Water Citizen News. We're getting our first issue out this week, and hopefully our next issue will be focused on Hispanic Heritage Month and various water issues from the acequias on the and we're struggling with some of the issues of the technical aspects, and Jorge made a good point about the fact that scientists don't communicate well with non-scientists no matter where they are. So where there are issues of language, where there are issues of cultural, and recognizing that we're dealing with multiple cultures and people who've been here for multiple generations versus not so many, and where it's scientific. And I was at a recent presentation by someone who was doing testing for one of the EPA WaterSense, the handheld, the high power washers for restaurants, and whether people were satisfied using the low flow ones and whether they were working as well as what they thought of them. And I asked about the fact that a lot of their testing was at places like Founding Fathers and the cafeteria at Harvard, and places that have very strong environmental awareness. I said, well, that's the management. The people who are actually using the devices don't speak English, so they don't really care about water. I mean, it was kind of the answer. So a lot of these solutions, a lot of these solutions are going to involve technical issues that, again, are hard to communicate as is, and behavioral change kinds of things that are hard to communicate in any language. So how are we looking at, when it comes to going beyond just the attitude and acceptance of sustainability to actually implementing solutions, actually putting in water efficient and energy efficient devices and changing our behavior in our public spaces? How are we addressing it on language and culture and technical communications?
Do you want to approach that? Something that I've seen to be a huge success with the Latino community is, we listen to radio in the morning. We have more radio hearers, I guess is the word, than any other community. We also use a lot of the smartphones. We're probably Mark can probably, I don't know if you know, Mark, the percentage of how many smartphone users we have, or a higher percentage. Right? So that's something that perhaps that's an approach to get to the Latino community. Maybe not the traditional ways that you would. Kind of researching that. What do we listen to? You know, kind of. I would say would be kind of the approach, because we are interested. You know, a lot of us have indigenous, heritage. It's not only Latino, which we find somewhat insulting. As soon as we enter in the United States, we're all Latino. Well, we really, we're diverse in so many ways. So approach is I think, the way to go. Really invest in that research is my suggestion to change behavior.
Yeah, and I think that's a real failing of government and the science community in general, is billions of dollars in one way or another have been focused on issues like climate change and others. How much investment has gone into the social sciences? How many cultural anthropologists and behavioral economists have we employed to take a look and ask these questions? Obviously a real opportunity to do that in DC. Here we are talking about solutions to a problem that we really haven't identified what the problem is. But a couple of questions. What I'm hearing is that we're talking about a robustly diverse community within a community that we've defined as Latino. Should we, as government, on behalf of the mayor in the Sustainable DC context, be finding a way to speak to that larger community? Should we be aspiring to speak with subsets of that community? And are there, for example, to make this a more efficient process, because I'm not sure we're going to be able to put a communication plan together for 20 different nationalities. What are the hot button issues? Are there crucial hooks as issues, as opportunities, where the people of the land, does that open up some avenues for discussion about agriculture? Gardening is obviously something that Ola has focused on as an opportunity for engaging the community. Asthma, is that an issue in the community? And there anything we do that invests in cleaner air and getting kids out? And also the sort of socioeconomic issues. If we're able to alight on some issues that are truly going to lift a burden for families that are holding down 3 jobs, for example, to try to make ends meet. So that gets to, possibly energy investments that will reduce utility bills, other things like that. I'm throwing those out as, I'm scrambling here, but looking for, obviously, some feedback from you guys. This should be a Latino community that I'm asking the question to, but ideas.
Before we, Rick, and I know you're on my queue, I've forgotten about the folks on the phone. If you could quickly identify, I think there's 2 people at least, who you are, and then if you want to say something right now, go ahead. But Paul, are you on there?
Thanks.
Oh, Stella, is that you? Go on.
Yes, can people hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Hello, I'm Stella Topney. I'm working with several nonprofits on natural systems issues, and also George Washington University. Very interested in this conversation. And I want to second or third or fourth the comments that a number of you made about kind of changing the concept of outreach. And I'd rather have us be talking, using the word with rather than to, outreach to. Let's think about, conversation with our Latino residents. And I think also that I would encourage us to think about where the models of sustainability come from when we have this conversation. I think we're very kind of Eurocentric in terms of how we look to the best models of sustainability. And I think a lot of our immigrants, whether it's Latino immigrants or Asian immigrants or African immigrants, bring their own models of sustainability that we could learn from. And so I think we have to have more of a critical dialogue with our immigrant communities and actually listen to their critique and to learn from whether it's resource efficiencies or agricultural practice that we as a city could learn from. And I think this is going to be a really important part of our sustainability kind of diversity project.
I think that's a great comment because of socioeconomic reasons, a lot of Hispanics are sustainable, not because it's cool, because of necessity.
Exactly.
And there's actually, you can see in there, there's a lot of opportunities with programs like the LID rebates, like rain barrels, and because people in many Latino communities, they have been using stormwater for many, even there's traditional ancient technologies in Mexico and Guatemala that date back to the times of the Mayans and the Aztecs to collect stormwater in underground cisterns. So that I think that's a very interesting point, to consider those technologies and those approaches.
I just want to make sure, is anyone else on the phone that wants to say something? I know there's not that many. Okay, Rick is next, and then we'll go with Chris.
I just wanted to follow up with a lot of, I think Nicole raised it first, following the issues of trust and relationship building. This notion of parachuting in and then trying to create relationships out of thin air, it just doesn't work that way. And I know a month and a half or two ago, there was a citywide tenants meeting. There were several hundred people there. Maybe I missed somebody, but I don't think I saw anybody in this room there. But that's where we have to go. Not just for Latinos, not just for African Americans or whatever, but just for the people that we want to be part of our movement. There is a sustainability aspect or dimension to almost everything that goes on in this city. So I know Director Tula was talking about being efficient in our communication plan. I don't want to be against efficiency, but in some ways we can't really be efficient. It's about relationship building, which means we have to not ask people to come to our meeting. We have to go to their meetings. And their meetings may not be about quote-unquote sustainability. It may be about tenants' rights. It may be about health issues or jobs or what have you. But there's a sustainability aspect to that. And I think we have to be willing to invest the time to go, to meet people, not necessarily to push our agenda, but to listen. One of the things that's really important, and when I get called to go to a community meeting about a particular topic that I'm trying to push, I try to go a week, the meeting or two before I show up, just to sit and listen, see how people interact with each other, see what language they're using. Just because we're all speaking English, and of course, in this case, the language gets even more complicated, but even in a sense where everybody's speaking English, we don't always use the same words the same way, or the same phrases the same way. So it's real important to listen to how people use language, and then to be willing to divest of ourselves of our jargon. I mean, a lot of us have spent a lot of years in school, and part of that time and effort and money was learning jargon, and we like to go out and use this jargon because it impresses people, lets other people know how much time and money and effort we spent getting our education, but a lot of times it's meaningless. So I think it's incumbent on us to not just go to meetings and establish relationships, but also figure out after we go to these meetings, how do we translate our technical concepts into the language that people are using at the meeting, so that when it becomes our turn to talk, or when there is an environmental or other aspect of the agenda to talk about, that we can talk about it in terms that will resonate with the people we're talking with. Otherwise, we're just talking to ourselves.
Now, Chris, you're next, and I want to eventually, in the next 5 minutes, shift a little bit to see if we could come up with some specific stuff that we might be able to do. That maybe I could go through the panelists first after Chris talks, and maybe we can suggest or things that you're thinking in your head we might be able to pursue, and then try to get some more ideas from the rest of us too. But go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. My name is Chris Turner. I live in Ward 4. I'm Vice President of a neighborhood association called Neighbors Incorporated that was founded in 1958. And on the block I live on, we have a really nice community garden that was started in the 80s. And there's one gardener from Guatemala, and he's, I think, part indigenous Guatemala, but he's amazing with the things he grows, and I think he has a lot to offer that maybe the more, American gardeners don't know. And so my thought was, if DC Water could promote their sub-meter. So DC Water has a sub-meter program where you can get a reduction on water that you use in your garden And then they have the RiverSmart program, Mr. Tulu, that DDOE and DC Water share somehow. But I think if we could, the homeowners in the city, if we could figure out how to include our neighbors, a lot of them who live in apartments, you know, like, hey, come and have a garden bed, or, so that might be a good way. But you know, in the RiverSmart program, one of the problems, I think, is the incentives haven't come through yet. So a lot of us have gotten the rain barrels and the casey trees and the river gardens and paid for all that, but DC Water hasn't yet given us credits on our monthly bill.
Well, let me just clarify a little bit, Chris. You are getting the financial support from DDOE, which runs the RiverSmart Homes program and a RiverSmart Schools program, and a bunch of other RiverSmart programs. So those, you know, that support should be going directly to homeowners who are making those kinds of investments. The credit program for impervious surface, so everybody gets charged if they own property for how much impervious surfaces that their property represents. And we already have a credit program that is just coming into force now at DDOE for our portion of that overall fee that people are charged, which will give you up to 55% credit for putting rain barrels in, pervious paving, green roofs, whatever it is, planting trees. DC Water is yet to do that, and their portion of the fee is much larger than ours, and so it's going to be much more meaningful. The flip side of that is that they are under the gun to spend out about $2.6 billion to rectify our stormwater problem here in DC, and that is their revenue stream. So they're challenged, obviously, but clearly through Sustainable DC, finding out what the appropriate combination of public policy, incentives, behavior change opportunities, and all the rest of it, and coming up with a strategy that moves forward effectively in all relevant communities to do that is an open question, still a strategy that's evolving. So anyway, appreciate your comments on RiverSmart particularly.
And I almost forgot about Mark. Mark.
Hi, I'm Mark Magani with the National Latino Coalition on Climate Change. We're a relatively young umbrella coalition of 12 of the largest national Latino civil rights organizations in DC. And so we do work on a national scale, but it's great to see that DC is working on this as well. And when I was coming to this meeting, which Andrea, our top and former employee, got hired away by Earthjustice, invited me to. I was thinking maybe 10 a dozen people for such a tight issue, but I'm happy to see a lot of people around this room that care about this issue, or maybe have been frustrated or didn't know how to, or wanted to learn, and that's impressive. The one solution or one frustration that I have had that can turn into a solution is that very few organizations, very few departments, very few areas have Latino representation within their offices. So when we talk about frustrations about being able to reach the Latino community, or having to parachute in on an issue that's hot right then, or having to be able to learn the lingo or learn the community, a solution to that is having an ambassador, having someone internal who is a Latino,
Right.
who can make those relationships, and that is their job, part of their job, or their job. You know, you have events like this because Roxana knows the community. She is an ambassador. When Sierra Club has Isabel or Mr. Sierra, who works for them, they do outreach because they have ambassadors. NRDC has an ambassador. Earthjustice has ambassadors. They're the ones that can reach the community because they're the ones with access. I'm one of the ambassadors. I'm not the only one for the National Latino Civil Rights Organizations on the issues of environment and climate change and energy. And so it is an endeavor to find a quality or to find a Latino employee who, just like it is in any other community, but it's something that we all need to make the effort to do, to find a professional Latino that can work in your offices and in your departments, who can represent you, who can be at these meetings, who can, I mean, I love that you're here, but look around and see who's Latino. It's very few. and it needs to be more, and that needs to grow, because we do care, but we aren't in areas where our levels where we are noticed and recognized, and that needs to happen. So it's not just hiring someone at a low level, it's also elevating them and keeping them at a high level to represent. And then when you need to parachute in, that person knows who the key players are. That person can get you in a second. You have the trust already built in, and you can efficiently and quickly get the job done. And that goes for everyone here.
Well, if we can hold off for a sec, what I want to do is I want to shift kind of over to the, what are possible outcomes from this? Maybe there's some short-term things we can think about doing, and is there? I mean, I'm sure you're willing to increase coordination between agencies, for example.
No.
But,
No.
we can all go home now. But maybe what I thought we'd do is I'd first start with the government folks and maybe just speak to that a little bit more about, just like even ideas, even mud on the wall. Just throw something out there. Something grand, something
Trying to like put us on the spot, aren't you?
Yeah.
Totally.
You say you said last month.
Exactly. Well, it's on tape. But temper your comments so it's safe. So, but it's maybe.
I'm going to let Roxanne.
Okay.
Roxanne can go first.
Sure. Mark, I'm so glad you said that. It is so, so true. Even in the government, we're 2% of the population, employed in the government, which are bilingual, which is sad, even though we're 10% of the population. Exactly what he said, I think, is what we need to do. We need to have bilingual staff at another level, and actually even employed in some of the agencies and some of the nonprofits.
Well, I'm looking for a job.
Okay. But one of the things that Office of Latino Affairs is doing right now is that we're actually partnering with Virginia and Maryland farmers, with the National Farmers Association, to partner with UDC to do a whole cycle, in the sense bringing their vegetables, fruits into the market. UDC and then would do compost and then bring the compost back to the farmers. So it's something that we need to do, more projects like that. They're all Latino farmers, all of them. They're not necessarily DC residents, but DC residents are benefiting from it. So projects like that need to exist a lot more.
Maybe anything else regarding just generally connecting with the sustainability program? Is there any?
Employ more like bilingual employees.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, we are actively engaged right now in trying to do that with a sustainable DC particular focus. So one of the things that prompts me is we've got several Latino employees at the department, and I'm thinking we may have a homegrown ambassador and maybe going out and looking to see who those people are. Ambassadors, actually, we should make it plural. Just sort of cultivating that and creating a sense of, I don't know if seniority is the right word, but certainly empowerment and sort of creative, innovative, and what I'll call in-reach opportunity for folks who may otherwise be doing very technical jobs. I think it's a terrific idea.
I would like to just sort of follow up on what Christoph was saying. Throughout the summer, we've been reaching out to some groups that we felt like we hadn't previously done a great job of reaching out to, and so far it's included seniors and youth groups and things like that. But I think in the future, we'd really like to build off of this ambassadorship idea and start working with the Office of Latino Affairs and the Office of the Asian Pacific Islanders and the Office of Aging. We've met with them several times, and really set up a coalition so that we have people who are leaders and know the communities much better than we would ever be able to, and really learn from some of those questions that Christoph asked about what really matters to them, and so that something like even our handouts are translated, or things are very relatable. We're also making a new outreach website to talk about the plan and the initiative, and it will be translatable, accessible, just on the page.
Who are you with, sir?
I'm with the Office of Planning, so we're jointly working on the Sustainable DC project.
And actually, if I could point out, one of the things we see from the outside, and all the stuff you're talking about, anyway, the environmental community, we should try to help you with, well, I don't know how, but we could figure out ways that we could
We've got some terrific resources sitting right here. So.
Isn't there a danger of tokenism? Well, I mean, if someone said, oh, you're the black engineer, go talk to the blacks, or you're the woman engineer, go talk to the housewives.
Well, that's why we're saying bilingual. because you need to make sure you speak to the community. You need to speak in, the way they speak.
Right, but just the idea that the Latino, technical staff should become the ambassador.
Well, I think it raises an interesting question. I presume that if you are bilingual and you have good Spanish-speaking skills, that is okay. It doesn't matter whether you're Puerto Rican or Mexican or what have you, that alone is going to create a foundation for at least communication, which I think is the precursor to trust and other issues.
You are bilingual.
Right.
Right.
Maybe not.
Yeah, Dan?
Sorry, just I think to address what you're saying, I think that's a really good point, but I think part of it is that we build this ambassador, I'm with the DDOE, we build an ambassador program and invite people from within DDOE or within OP, if they want to participate, if they feel like they've got a good connection to any sort of community, to sort of do that, as opposed to like, hey, Jorge, will you help us out talking to this group, but that's obviously inappropriate, but right, I think that just, inviting people to find their affiliation group and then be a part of a program as opposed to like seek people out because they are of a certain group.
It's also great to make it someone's job. I mean, I haven't heard, how many times I've heard Latino employees say, I've got my full-time job and they expect me to translate.
Right.
I have two jobs now. I have, and so it's not necessarily fair to that person that, they want to volunteer, that's fine, but this is a job. And that would be great if it became a job in a lot of the departments.
Actually, that's what I wanted to touch on because I think we've been talking about language as almost a proxy for cultural competency, but just because you're a Spanish speaker doesn't mean you're appropriately sensitive to all the different, populations we've been discussing. And I work at Earthjustice, and we have some of the same challenges trying to get more people of color on board. And even though I'm on the diversity task force, being a person of color doesn't make me like an inclusion expert. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not what I went to school for, and that's not what my professional experience and training has surrounded around. So I think that's important for everyone to recognize that just because someone is a racial or ethnic minority, they're not an inclusion expert. They might have some valuable things to add into the conversation, but I think we shouldn't discount the value of sometimes bringing in a third party where that is what they know about, so that they can arm organizations with the strategies to, once they leave, still know how to get the job done. Because it was important to me when we brought on new clients that are predominantly, organizations of color, that it's easy for me to be, the person to talk with them, but I don't want the organization's entire relationship to be dependent on my employment there. So I want to make sure that other people are building up their cultural competency skills, so that in my absence, they will feel comfortable. I know that sometimes language is a legitimate barrier, but in instances where it's not, I think we need to make sure everyone can't just use that as an excuse. Well, you're a Puerto Rican, you talk to a Puerto Rican. You're black, you talk to them.
That's it's much more fundamental in terms, it's not just the spoken language, it's also the broader language, the broader issues. We have abjectly failed as a society on climate change communication, for example. And the reason for this is because it's so complex. And this is complex. There's no simple solution to this. We've already identified social scientists as needing to be an integral part of this for at least the awareness of the cultures and other issues that are related there. We've got, of course, the language facility that is so important. We've got personal skills. You've got some folks who are very fluent, very culturally adept, who are not the kinds of people you'd want to send out there and hug babies. And so and this is where things start to break down, and so that where we have to inject a little bit of reality here is all of a sudden, from a DC government perspective, we're talking about investments of a scale and duration and quality that we have to go back and think very, very hard about, because I know the climate change community, and I was part of that, working very hard away on this thing, not understanding one whit why all that profound billion-dollar invested knowledge that we have wasn't having any impact. As a matter of fact, the numbers were going ways that we weren't very comfortable with. And so, there's just being able to communicate no matter what the community is, no matter what their origins, whatever their language, is much more a science combination of sciences than I think most of us take credit for. Folks here would say, well, why don't we just get the scientists out there talking with the people? We've tried that. We have tried that, and all these things in terms of language and cultural sensitivity and all the rest are the foundational sources for failure there. So anyway, it's just an observation that we really have to think about this, and I hate to say it, but we do have to be, getting back to a message earlier, efficient about this as well. But at least if we're not asking the right questions, which we are collectively doing here, we're not going to get the answer because nobody has deigned to ask the question in the first place. So,
yeah, I think that's a great point, because Latin America, as some of you know, is really the most unequal region in the world. It's a very classist society. So, like someone from the city with education is going to have some attitudes toward someone from the countryside or for indigenous origins, so you really have to take that into account. And on the translation of the materials, it's really important to do it right, because I've seen a lot of materials. The other day I was at a park, a Maryland park, and there was a sign about blue crabs, and it was really
Terrible.
It was terrible. Yeah.
Just use the translation app.
It seems that they use they use like Google Translator or something like that. And seeing it from a Spanish speaker perspective, the kids here, the second generation, they're speaking Spanglish, and if you got those signs that are not grammatically correct, you're kind of
You just lost them.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, not credible.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Emma?
I was just going to say, I think that, a lot of the issues that, different communities are concerned about are issues we've dealt with for many, many years, and we know a lot about them. And so I think there's one element we've really been focusing on, which is we have to be listening to all the concerns from diverse communities, and we need to be involving everybody in the conversation and figuring out what people think is most important from an environmental sustainable perspective. But some of that we also know, which is people of color tend to be disproportionately affected by toxic pollution. From where it's cited, from chemicals people are exposed to in workplaces and homes and air, and kids are playing in contaminated areas. And I think these are really important issues to make sure we're including kind of an environmental justice set of issues that a movement has focused on and continues to evolve and expand for many years within the DC government's vision for sustainable DC. I think there's an educational aspect of that. I think that talking to people who are fishing about the toxic chemicals that they're being exposed to and sort of dealing with some issues like that is really what made me think of this issue. And I think it's something that I love all the issues on the Sustainable DC chart, and I think handout, but I think that environmental justice and the toxic chemical angle, helping people understand how to protect themselves and how to protect children and how we can kind of expand and deal with some of those bigger issues is something that should be part of that topic list.
Yeah, and it's not so clear there, but health in general is an overlay over these 9 particular focused areas that we did, and education is another that you may not see so robustly reflected here, or maybe. But wrapping in these, and equity being certainly another one of those huge overlay issues, because there's nothing in here that doesn't have impacts on all of those, employment being another one.
Language, some people might find equity to be an offensive concept, because it's like, how can we all be included equally? Like, the environmental justice community might not like the word equity. It's little things like that.
Yep,
I don't
see?
want to set someone on
Exactly.
fire.
There you go.
So, yeah. Just
Can
one
you
thing.
turn that off? I think that's it.
I like that.
There you go, thank you.
I might mention AWS is part of a committee that is overseeing a study that is doing a survey of the anglers in the Anacostia River. We're going to have some interesting results in the fall, but I can tell you some of my personal experiences. There's a lot of anglers, African Americans, mostly on the DC side of the Anacostia River, and on the Maryland side, they're mostly Hispanics. And I do a lot of work around there, wetland work and canoeing and stuff, and I usually see them. Sometimes I families picnicking, and the kids are swimming like if they were in a lake in Maine. they don't know about the risks of swimming in this water. And the same for fishing. There's a lot of folks fishing. I've been with some folks that, the other day there was a Salvadorian guy that caught a snakehead, the invasive species, and he was already chopped and ready to go. He was cleaning in the river water the chops ready to take home, and he didn't even know it was a snakehead. So I explained what it was and talk about the risks of consuming the skin and stuff. And they don't know about this, a lot of them, and they are very interested in learning about these topics. And not only about that, they are also just about the fishing and the outdoor activities. They really like it, and I think that's a good angle to engage them into broader environmental topics.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to say we've run out of time, but we'll have maybe a few more comments. I just want to say before we finish off with a few more comments is that I think one of the things that's really going to move us forward is we keep getting together and trying to talk around this stuff. This is a preliminary discussion. A couple of things that we tried to do last year, I was going to share, but we can do that at another point. But I think the approach, and what happens with the network, if we just keep getting together and talking about it, eventually things start to happen, and that actually can have a huge impact. I also wanted to note, too, Earthjustice is obviously really thinking hard about this. Raise your hand if you're from Earthjustice. There's like 4 or 5 of you. Yeah, like in fact, that quote by Angela Park, I know they've actually worked with Angela and with their national organization to try to figure out, what are we going to do about this stuff? And they might be a huge resource for the rest of us environmental groups to figure out how we want to organizationally start to move more on this stuff. Any other major comments from you guys that you want to make at this point before? Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Daniel Hoakley with WADA. I just want to make a real quick pitch for transportation as sort of a gateway to sustainability for a lot of folks. Not everybody thinks about greening their lives, not everybody thinks about recycling or what have you, or water use, but everybody gets around the city one way or another. And a lot of places in this city don't have access to sustainable transportation yet. DDOT's done a lot of groundbreaking work in making transit and biking and walking accessible for a lot more people, but there's a lot of ground left to cover. And when it comes to introducing people to sustainability concepts, the way they get around the city is instantly recognizable and a way that has a lot of meaning for them. It also helps them introduce sustainability to their kids and to their own communities, and it's a great way to just open the conversation.
Yes.
I had a question for you guys. We are making a big push this year with the Rock Creek Conservancy in getting Latino populations out to volunteer in the park and kind of increase their sense of stewardship. And we've partnered in Maryland with Casa de Maryland, and we kind of recognized that the best way to kind of reach a community is to find the community leaders, which I know Ms. Olivas mentioned. And they've been incredibly helpful, kind of putting us in touch with the community leaders, and the outreach has gone very successful up there. I just wanted to know if you guys knew of any resources to try and do the same thing on the DC side of things, because we've had relatively little success down here.
Yeah, there's a lot of organizations.
Mm-hmm.
There's Father Moises from Sagrado Corazon. That's a huge, huge connection to the community. There's LAYC, that is great. There's Centronia. Mary Center, Maria Gomez is great too. They have thousands of people that visit the clinic that can help you with some outreach.
I think you need to exchange cards.
Yeah, there's
Or is there a list online or a way that other environmental groups can find out through your office how to coordinate?
Yeah, we can send you a list.
You have a website?
Yeah, Office of Latino Affairs .gov.
Maybe we could get some folks together to put some kind of resource guide together, and just so that there's, I mean, nothing fancy. It doesn't have to be a huge project, but just start sharing some information. I'm sorry, who else was? Yes, Peter.
Peter Ensign with DC Greenworks, and I appreciate what many have said about just building relationships with leaders that are in the community. I think that's a place to start, and then at a little higher level. when there's talk of, all of these different groups, factions, within a community, or that it makes me think of Christoph's term of efficiency. I run a very small organization, and we put together, certain materials, but if we were to put them out in all sorts of languages and look at the phrasing, and we just don't have the staff and the resources to do that sort of thing. I feel that there is something more global. We go out and talk to people in communities from upper Northwest to down into Southeast, and we're in Ward 6. And what I find, and what my experience has taught me, is to walk in with a blank piece of paper, and just begin to ask questions. And invariably, wherever I am, and I'm coming in with this environmental stuff that we can be doing about stormwater, but don't even bring it up. What's going on in your community, and invariably it falls into issues of health and safety, transportation, convenience, and there are environmental approaches, through green infrastructure, which is our sort of basket, that can address a lot of those issues. But instead of coming in and saying, we've got these great technologies, some of which are thousands of years old, some of which are brand new and cutting edge, instead of bringing any of that up, it's asking questions and finding that there is this common denominator. There are cars speeding up and down this alleyway. Well, let's put some solar lighting in. Let's take out the pavement and put in some pervious pavers. And there are ways to modify and slow things down and solve lots of problems all at once, but certainly address their most pressing needs that they have.
Good. Yes.
I like what you said, because if you think about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which probably most of us are familiar with, it's good to meet people where they are, and maybe the people already are doing these types of environmental things, and it maybe they're not. And so, in a way, environmentalism and sustainability is a solution, but have we asked what the question is, what the problem is? And I love the way you talked about that of, you end up meeting their needs with things that are environmental, but that's the issue. And another thing that I was thinking about is, trying to get minority people into positions of authority, ambassadorship, and respect. There are often institutional barriers, institutional racism, structures which are very unconscious, that are built into the way the organization works, that just sort of push them out ultimately. And so there are ways to work with that also, to so that once you get somebody into a position, that they can actually succeed. So those are just a couple of thoughts.
And I just add to that, as the director of the DC Environmental Network, I've often tried to align myself with other groups in the community, and like DC Fiscal Policy Institute, so others might eat, and other groups that work on in broader groups of folks. And it's really hard, and I love all the people I work with. I mean, they're great. We have an amazing environmental community. But to get folks to kind of shift a little bit of how they look at issues and realize that it's really tough, and it's really hard to do this kind of stuff. But maybe it's easier now. I think we have an environment in the city that I think we're going to be able to get a lot more done. But anyway, I'm just sharing the thought. Who else? Yes.
I'm probably one of the only outsiders in this room, not being from the area, but just to... Sorry?
It's easy, no one's from here.
And that is a terrible comment, because there's Washingtonians, there's DC individuals that have lived here.
I'm Zach. I'm from Pittsburgh. I just got my MBA in sustainability at Duquesne. So I'm looking for work in the area and came to kind of see what's going on here. I have my undergraduate degree in Spanish, so this is like the perfect lead. Now, what I thought I was walking into today was I I thought this was actually going to be people from the Latino community coming to talk about what we're talking about. So I was kind of baffled when I walk in and it's all these organizations who are trying to change the world, which is great. That's what I want to be a part of. But I think that a place to start, I think we're getting to it, is to have folks from the community sit around a table like this, perhaps sponsored by some of the organizations that are here, especially Office of Latino Affairs, and talk about some of these issues and where they can start and what they need and what's important to them. I feel like that's what we're missing. We're talking about what we're going to do for them. What about what they want done for themselves? And I don't know how challenging it is to get a bunch of folks from that community to sit around a table and talk about issues like this, but it seems like that would be the place to start. We talk about ambassadors and this and that, and that's a good idea, but what about the people who are actually going to be a part of these changes? Where are they? So I was actually very surprised when I walked in today and they weren't here. I didn't know what to expect. I'm not from the area. And this is great that we're doing this, but it seems like that could be a next step.
Well, I think it just demonstrates the work that we got to do, and as a preliminary discussion, we have some representation. Not that it doesn't, again, that does not reflect the diversity in the city, but you're right. I mean, it's at some point. Some of the meetings that we're going to have are going to have to be different, be differently designed. And we all reached out. I think I asked folks to reach out to their different lists and stuff, and it's a process. But at some point, I think you'll find meetings that are more like you're describing. Anything else? Yes.
I should have put this out there because I am from DC, but and in years prior I did a lot of just sort of outreach, like postcarding and canvassing and all that stuff. And one attitude that I got was this idea that if we're doing things that are going toward environmental things, then we're somehow taking resources away from the social things. And I think that we talked a lot about meeting people where they are. We talked a lot about what the communities want. And I think that, part of this is a framing issue. We talk about sustainability, and that's a word that means 50 different things to 50 different people. And for me, it has a very strong social component, but that's not necessarily reflected in, the sustainable DC resources or, just sort of in some of the conversations that we've had. So I think that, we have had that conversation about how some of these solutions could be environmental good, socially good, and all that stuff, but I think that's something to keep in mind.
And I just want to end it with that, a small subsection of that quote that I read earlier. The values and vision of environmentalism, diversity, and inclusion are inextricably linked. And then the last sentence of that quote is, organizational and movement-wide impacts are at risk if diversity is not seen as mission critical. So hopefully part of what we're trying to do now is shift and realize that the success of environmental initiatives and all the stuff that the city's working on is diversity is mission critical to success in all these endeavors, and so hopefully this first discussion is a step towards all of us prioritizing that a little bit more. And I want to thank our speakers. Thank you very much. Our next discussion is going to be, this is going to be a dicey one. This is going to be a good one. It's going to be on the 6th of next month. It's going to be about the energy grid